Okay, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a video about doing a powder coated cup. It's quite a long process to do a cup in the manner that I'm going to do it. It's going to have about 6 or 7, maybe even 8 layers of powder coat on it. I'm going to show how I do it. It may or may not be the right way, and there might be an easier way. So if you're a powder coater and you're out there and you know how to do it an easier way or a better way, please by all means let me know, because the way that I'm about to do it, I'm pretty sure is a fairly tedious way to do it. But it gets the results that I'm after, because with powder coat, it's not like conventional painting. It's not like I can airbrush, although I have an airbrush. If you don't know what an airbrush is, this is an airbrush. So I have used one of these a lot. I used to own an airbrush business where I airbrushed t-shirts, I airbrushed motorcycles, so I did a lot of things with the airbrush. And so I'm very familiar with how to use this, but using this tool with powder coat takes a whole other process that at this point in time I'm not going to get into. So right now I'm just sticking to the powder coating, and I'm going to use several stencils and use several layers of stencils to try and get the cup that I want to do. So join me and we'll see what happens. So the first cup that I'm going to do is going to be just a 2-tone cup, and I'll spray the base coat with a color that's called Eastern Dragon, which is kind of an orange, but it has a lot of metal flake in it, and it changes colors in the suns from blues to greens, which is, in my opinion, kind of perfect for a fishing type theme. And then on top of that, I'll use a color that's called Blue Hammer Tone, and what that does is it puts a nice blue finish on it, and as it bakes it kind of cracks and shows a black through it, and so it gives it kind of a mottled effect when you're done with it. And so that'll be the 2 colors that'll show through. This cup won't have any stainless steel showing through on it, so I'll use these stencils once I get the Eastern Dragon put on the cup initially and bake that for a little while, and then put the Blue Hammer Tone on, put the stencils on and then the Blue Hammer Tone on, and then pull the stencils and then bake the whole cup, and you'll see how it comes out. The other one, the other cup that I'm going to do is going to have 2 Cardinals on it, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different stencils per bird, and so it's going to have 5 different colors, although when I put the red on I will spray a clear on top of that, because red tends to bleed through, because my top color is going to be white. It's going to represent a cardinal sitting on a branch in the snow. Hopefully it goes well and I can get it done. So I've got my stencils lined up the way that they should go, and the only color that will show through from the cup is the what is on the picture. It originally was white around, there was a highlight on the eye, and so that part will still remain stainless steel when I get done with the whole thing. So I'll show you how that goes, and hopefully I can get everything lined up. That's a lot of stencils and a lot of layers to go through. Here we go. So now what I'll do after I've sprayed my initial coat is I will inspect it really well to make sure that I've got good coverage and pretty even coverage. And the way I do that is get a really bright light, and then I'll turn the cup around and I'll see that I have at least even coverage. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for anywhere on there that might have some of the cup showing through, or some of the stainless showing through on the cup, and any fingerprints or anything, and I don't see anything. This looks pretty good. It looks pretty smooth, so this is going to go into the oven. I'll run this over to the oven and put it in there. We'll let that bake out for about 10 minutes. We'll pull it out, let it cool off, apply the stencil, and go for the next layer. Okay, so that came out really well. What I'll do now is I'll let this fully cool down, because it's about 400 degrees right now. So this will get fully cooled back to room temperature. I'll probably set it outside because it'll work faster. It's winter time. And then I'll apply the stencils, and then I'll apply the top coat. Okay, so the cup's cooled, and now what I'll do is I'll take it off the stand, and I try not to touch the cup on the surface where it's going to be painted as much as possible. So what I'm going to do is take it off the stand, and then from here I'll work with it to put the stencils on it. I don't mind touching the bottom because this is going to have a rubber piece on the bottom. It makes it really nice. But as you can see, the powder is starting to flow out really nicely. And it's kind of hard to tell, but you can see kind of in the reflection of the other lights how the different colors change. And as it moves around, and this particular cup and this particular powder, as it moves around and changes in the sunlight especially, it looks beautiful. It's really got a lot of different colors in it. It changes from blues to greens to orange, and it has the general overall gold over it. But we'll see what we're going to do. We're going to turn this into a fisherman's cup. And we'll make sure that we don't have any dust on it. That's the first stencil installed, and then we'll turn it around, put the fish on the back. So then what you have when you're looking at the cup, when you're finished with it, you have the fisherman, and then you have the fish. And so this color will show through where I have the stencils. So what I'm going to do now is paint the blue on, and that'll cover up all of this gold that you see, and where the stencil is now is this gold will show through. It'll look really cool when it's done. Now it'll stay in here for just a couple of minutes until that powder on the outside starts to melt and flow out, is what it's called. And then I'll pull that out, take the stencil off, then it'll go back in the oven for a full cure. So it's out of the oven. This is just at flow out. So this cup is still really hot. You notice the hammer tone effect has not started to happen yet because the powder is not cured. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this cool for just a few minutes. But what I want to do is cool it just enough that the powder that's on top of the stencil, when I start to pull it off, doesn't get stringy, because it's a thermoplastic and it'll stretch and get stringy, and then there's a lot of cleanup to do. So what I want to do is let it solidify out in the cold for just a little bit, and then I can pull the stencil. So that's what I've done. A couple minutes is all it takes, and then we'll start pulling the stencil. Okay, so now that I've gotten a little warm up on that cup, I'm going to get ready for the next cup. The next cup is going to be about 6 or 7 layers, maybe 8 layers, depending on how the clear and the other colors work. It's got a lot more complicated stencils, so I may not spend as much time actually talking to the camera during this one, because I'll be concentrating on the I'll be concentrating on the cup. This one needs to come out nice, so I'll be concentrating. I won't be spending as much time actually communicating with what I'm doing. That's why I showed you on that first one, because it was a fairly simple example. I'll go through and clean up everything, get my next colors ready to go for the other cup. So as a side note, I'd like to mention today's sponsor, me. If you'd like to help me out doing these endeavors that I do, you can always look in the link below, and I have a couple of web shops that I sell my wares. If you want to buy a t-shirt or a cup or something like that, some way to support me. Or if you want to just send me some money, maybe I need to think about setting up a Patreon. Anyway, rainy days like this are good days for being off the Trike or the Velomobile anyway. It's just no fun to ride in the weather like this. At least it's not too cold. It was supposed to get really cold this week, and it did get cold earlier in the week, but now we've gotten rain in, so it's in the 40s. And so it's not too bad. Okay, so here's what the cup looks like after it's done. It's been outside, it's been cooling, and as you can see with the stencil and then in the light, you can see how it's kind of hard to tell on camera, but in sunlight, in natural sunlight, the color changes in this gold, and it changes from blues to greens. But this is what the cup looks like after it's been done. Okay, so on the brown, it's going to be a rather large stencil that's going to be covering the cup, so I'm getting a nice smooth even coat here, because I've had the orange and the black and I didn't fully coat those, so now I'm using this layer to kind of smooth everything out. Put this in the oven, take off those stencils, and then I'll put on the other stencils for the red. The red will go on towards the end, and then that should bring the picture together. One thing to note when you're doing this on cups is you might want to use clear transfer tape. I have just regular transfer tape, and it's a little more difficult to see where the stencil needs to line up, just for those who care. Alright, so here's what I kind of want to bring it in and show you. You can see as I do each layer, it starts to come into focus of what it's going to be. Now, you also have to remember you're looking at this upside down. But you can see how the bird is starting to take shape on this side, as well as this side. So now I'll come in with the red stencil, or the brown. So the brown has been painted. Now I'll put another stencil on top of this that'll cover up the brown, and it'll paint the red. And then we'll come in with a clear coat, and then the final stencil will cover up the entire bird, and it will reveal the whole bird. Okay, so now I'm up to the part where I'm going to spray the red. So as you can see, you have to think about this in reverse of how this is going to work. So you see I sprayed the brown on the whole cup, but knowing that I was going to put this stencil on top, which when I spray the red will allow the brown to stay there and show through, and then the cup will be red. Now red tends to bleed through colors, so that's why I'll put a clear coat on top of that. Some of you already know what's coming with this color, don't you? And then stencil over the whole thing and paint it white, which will give the finished picture. So bear with me as we go through the next process, a little bit of the process here. Alright, so this one will go back in the oven for a few minutes. We'll flow out the red, we'll pull the stencil, then we'll put it back in and cure it. Then we'll probably put a clear coat over it. And then I'll put my final stencil on top. Shoot the white. Fun! Okay, so now I'm going to shoot a clear over this, because red is a color that tends to bleed through other colors. And so one of the ways to help prevent that is to shoot a clear over it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear it, and then I'll come back with my final stencil, put it on top of each bird where it's supposed to be, and spray the whole coat of white, which will then outline everything, and you'll get the full picture of the bird. But I got to do this interim clear coat first to make sure that the red doesn't bleed through. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see this on camera, but you can see I've got the final stencil installed. And if you look really close here, you may be, let me see if I can get you to see it. You can kind of see underneath the different layers, and you can see how the picture will come through, and how when this is red and all of this is white, so the yellow stencil will be red and all the cup around it will be white, you'll be able to see the full bird on there. You can also see why I don't do these very often. They are very time consuming, but they're so worth it in the end, especially for the people receiving. So now it's obvious you can see the birds. So get this back in the oven for a full cure. We'll call this one good. Well, fortunately it's going to a girl, but as you can see, red is a terrible color to deal with. This had clear and then white on top of it, and it bled through the clear and the white. Simply incredible. Hopefully it won't be too big of a deal. I'll see about the person who ordered it if they still want it like that. But I think it came out okay. It's just that now the cup has a pink tint to it. Dealing with red. So, do you have any tips or tricks to dealing with the red like this? Even with the clear in between, it bled through the white. I don't know. Maybe what I'll have to do is get another stencil, put it over the birds again, and shoot the white again. I'm not sure. I'm very pleased with the way my Eastwood dual voltage held up though. And it covered everything. It sprayed just fine. So this is kind of frustrating because you saw as it came out it was fine all the way right up until the end. But you know, it is what it is. Like I said, it's going to a girl, so it should be fine that it's a little bit pink, hopefully. Oh boy. So because it was bothering me, I had to try and fix it just because that's how I am. And now I know that with red, I'm just gonna have to do it in another way and maybe make it the last color that I put on, because I did add another coat of white and that cleaned it up quite a bit. It's still got a slightly pink tint to it. That's not just a reflection of my jacket. It does have slightly a pink tint, but now it looks much better and it actually looks like it's on purpose. So I'll just have to remember, like Bob Ross says, we don't have any mistakes, we just have happy little accidents. And I gotta remember not to point out those happy little accidents to my customers. Well, that's all for now. Until next time. Cheers.